Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the 401 System I podcast, brought to you by Delinea. I'm the host of the show, Joe Carson, Chief Security Scientist and Advisory CISO. And it's awesome to have you here for another awesome, excellent episode. We've actually hit amazing stats with the podcast. It's now pretty much over 500,000 downloads and listens of the episode. So it's fantastic to have such a growing audience over the many years. And one of my favorite guests is always welcome to the show. And I think now you're definitely the most appeared guest on the episode. So it's fantastic to have you back. So Dan, welcome back to the podcast. If you want to give the audience, some of the new listeners, a little bit about who you are, your background, and what you do, it'd be great.
Hey, Joe, thanks so much for having me back. It's great to be with everyone. Likewise, I always love having you on my show, the CISO Insight show with Bright Talk, and also, just have, the conversations with you all around the country, run into each other, a lot of events. Always learn a ton. Your insights, your expertise is outstanding globally, top notch. And Dan Lohrmann. I'm the field CISO with Presidio. I mainly focus on public sector, but I do, kind of 80-20, maybe 20% private sector. But my background was I started my career at the National Security Agency, was in England with Lockheed in the 90s, working on US-UK intelligence. Can't talk about it. I have to kill people if they knew what we did, but it was all good. It was all for the good guys, and learned a ton in the intelligence community. But then 17 years in Michigan government after that. So in Michigan, I did a lot of different roles. Agency CIO. I was the CISO for the state of Michigan, Chief Information Security Officer, Chief Technology Officer for the state of Michigan. And then we brought physical and cybersecurity together actually before CISA did, and I was the CSO over physical and cybersecurity in Michigan. So that's my background. I've been with Presidio now a little more than 3 years, and just really glad to be on the show today.
And you're an author as well. You've got your own book out as well.
Yeah, we do. Actually, I've done 3 books. My latest one I co-authored with Shemaine Tan, Cyber May Day and the Day After. It's a leader's guide to preparing, managing, and recovering from inevitable business disruptions, which I know is a mouthful, but it's really stories around ransomware. So what happened behind the scenes in ransomware, Colonial Pipeline, those kinds of stories. And then, what happened in the C-suite when they got that note from the bad guys and what happened. So we do a lot of kind of before, during, and after incidents. You can do stories, mainly stories, but also best practices. And I also blog. I blog for my weekly blog is with Government Technology Magazine, Lohrmann on Cybersecurity. And that's what we're going to be basing our discussion on today, which is my annual prediction report.
And another fun fact, I was actually just finishing, and I just read a book over the holidays, the CISO Complex book. And as I was going through it, I did see a quote from you on it, which was fantastic. And I loved the quote because it was around about, not being the person in security that says no, and about how you do something. I think it was around the Wi-Fi access quote.
Yeah, the Wi-Fi story is now it's kind of famous. I tell that story a lot, but yeah, I won't go through the whole story now unless you want to hear it. But I mean, the whole story is, I was the guy who tried to kill Wi-Fi back in 2004, so 20 years ago. The NSA guy, bad idea, shouldn't do Wi-Fi, not secure, can't protect it. And it's a long story. It's about a 10-minute story, but I almost
we can leave that for another
episode. Got fired. I almost got fired. I literally, that was the aha moment in my career where, I learned that, you got to get to yes, you got to be an enabler, or you're going to, you got to, CISOs are famous for, the answer is no. What was the question? Yeah. Whatever the question, the answer is no. You can't do that. We're famous for that. And, I was the worst of the worst. That was my modus operandi.
We all were doing the same. I was the same. I was an enforcer of security. I was like, you do it this way. And then I think we realized that if we don't do it ourselves, they're going to find shadow IT. They're going to find workarounds. You'll find it here anyway. And it would be better to be in your control with the right security in place rather than people going and doing shadow IT and creating, the things that you don't even see and don't know about.
Yeah, and I'll just say one last thing before we dive into the predictions. Is just one thing my boss, and I had white papers from NSA, CIA, DIA, FBI. I had all this headlines from Home Depot getting hacked, Lowe's getting hacked, people going to the cash register, downloading Social Security numbers, credit card numbers. It was pretty ugly, and I had a lot of. But my boss said to me, Terry Takai at the time, but she said, Dan, I've been to Dow, Ford, Chrysler, and GM. They all have Wi-Fi in their conference rooms. What do they know that you don't know? I'm giving you 1 week to figure this out, or I want your resignation. So this was
Whoa.
like literally like I was going to get fired. But I learned a bigger lesson. And it wasn't just that story's about Wi-Fi, but then I tell the story, it could be cloud, it could be bringing your own device to work, BYOD. This one is AI. It's like can't do AI, not secure. And believe me, there's a lot of insecurities. And we'll talk about AI. A lot of things could go wrong with AI. But you can't just say no. You can't just dismiss it and throw it out with baby with the bathwater. You've got to get to yes, and you've got to do that securely. And that's really our challenge as CISOs and as security professionals is getting to yes in a secure manner.
Yeah, and then you have visibility, and that's what's critical. You have the knowledge and visibility of what's in place. So today's episode, and it's awesome because what I always enjoy is every year you do a lot of the predictions. You do the predictions blog, and then you do the CISO Insights. And for me, it's always going through that list is always really intriguing, and to see you get the kind of normal flow predictions, and then you get the ones that's like, whoa, okay, I didn't even think of that. So today's episode, I want to go through what was for you as you were going through that list. What were some of the most notable ones? What was the ones that you were like, wow, that's something that's, pretty, it's going to happen. We're close to it. What was the list? What was the things that was, top of mind?
Yeah, I mean, two jump out to me. I'll just mention two different extremes, and everyone knows AI. Last year, just to recap for the audience, last year when we started the year, everyone was saying, bring your own AI would be the new thing, and I had never, a year ago, it's like. Everyone kind of talks about that now, like, yeah, of course, bring your own AI. Everybody does that. But a year ago, it was like, it wasn't on the list. And so that really happened. And that was like an eye-opening thing for me. There was one, I'll save that for a moment from now, that jumped out at me that I was not thinking about going into the year, that I heard new term, new philosophy that I hadn't really heard much about that jumped out. But the one that I was kind of, expecting was Agentic AI emerges as a hot new opportunity, but also the new cyber threat vector. And Agentic AI, meaning we're going to have agent-based, the same way we have apps on our phone. It used to be like everything was, going, I'm dating myself here, but going back a decade, we all had phones, iPhones, and this and that, but it was all, it was web browser-based stuff. And then, of course, we moved, everyone knows this already, right? Your audience knows. We went to all these apps, and apps are on your phone, an app for this, an app for that. There's an app. Everyone's like, there's an app for that. There's an app for, the weather, and this and that. But that same thing's going to happen with Agentic AI. There's going to be agents. I mean, we may ultimately get to the Jetsons where there's one agent, to rule them all, if you will, right? Well, one agent can do everything, kind of the ChatGPT on steroids that can solve all of our problems in life from, traveling to this, to that. Go find me the best deal and then go ahead and book it for me and send me the tickets. I mean, we're not there yet, but that day may come a decade from now, 5 years from now. But we're all going to have agents, and those agents are going to help us in a wide variety of ways. And moving more and more to Agentic AI, lots of stories about that. All the big vendors have their own version of how that's going to play out. But then also that will be the way that trust that you have in that agent will then be what the bad guys use to gain access into your life, right? So it's going to be that yin and yang of, as we go more and more to Agentic AI in 2025, how do we now protect that in our lives? How do we now make sure that that's secure? So Agentic AI would be one big area. I think it showed up in every report or almost. We can dive into the details, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. There's a ton of different things we can talk about with Agentic AI. The one that jumped out at me, I just mentioned a second one that I just hadn't heard this term before. It was called pig butchering. And maybe you heard this term. Like, pig butchering, what the heck is that? I literally was seeing this show up in like 4 or 5 reports, and it kind of jumped out at me. It wasn't like, so what it really is, it's kind of the long-term financial fraud. So the idea is, the pig, I'm sorry for the graphic terms here, but they fatten up the pig, or they fatten up the cow, and then they slaughter it, right? Or the turkey for Thanksgiving, if you will, whatever it might be. You fatten up the hog, and then you butcher it, and then you have the bacon and everything else. Well, what does that mean for AI? What does that mean for cybersecurity? Well, the idea is the bad guys, and we've heard the term before, you're going back 4, 5, 6 years, but it's slightly different this time. So we've heard, we went from fishing to spear fishing to whaling going after the big fish. CEO fraud is another term for it, business email compromise. So those terms have been around for a few years. I mean, everybody who watches the show and you do a great job, know those terms. How this is a little different is it's almost the example I like to use. It's kind of funny, almost like going back to the movie. It dates me here. One of my early favorite movies in the 70s was The Sting. It was this movie. I don't know if you remember the movie The Sting. If you've seen that, Joe,
I have.
it's like a whole group of people act around, and it's all to try and get like $10 million from these criminals to trick them into getting this money. And it took they're basically acting, and it took all this time and energy, but it was for a big payday. And so the concept is that, some of these things we've talked about in the last year, 2 years, around deepfakes, around fraudulent, whether it be your fraudulent passports, fraudulent documents, fraudulent emails, fraudulent communications, multi-different venues or channels that people are going to use. So it might be a mixture of text, email, Facebook, LinkedIn.
It's almost like a modern day Ocean's 11.
Correct.
Digital
Ocean's 11 is a better example than my Sting going way back. Exactly. Ocean's 11 is another great example. It's a modern day Ocean's 11 against each of us. So it's like, well, this has to be true. So the bad actors know, they're going to try and call their bank, or they're going to, before they do this $1 million transfer, or God forbid, $10 million transfer or $100 million transfer, they're going to want to check a few things. But they're learning your processes. They're doing multiple things to trick you, creating call centers and creating very sophisticated operations, and maybe even including, which is really pretty crazy, but in-person meetings and just all kinds of things to basically trick you to get you to push that button and do that transfer. So at the end of the day, they want that payday. But it's it's a slow fraud. I'm not saying we're going to get rid of the fast, quick, click and boom, they stole my identity for $10. But the idea that it's a slow, long fraud, and pig butchering shows up, and also voice, phishing, voice phishing, other types of social engineering. It's going to be harder and harder and harder to detect using new technologies, using AI, using deepfakes. And I think that one jumped out at me.
Absolutely. That's one of the things. So for me, what you're talking about is really kind of more events such as the Bank of Bangladesh, the $1 billion heist that attempted. And that was fortunate enough that they did a few mistakes, not many, but a few mistakes that actually, took them away from their almost $1 billion payday, which was basically spelling foundation wrong in the wire, in the SWIFT transfers, and then also using an address of a bank, which happened to be on the watch list. The street just happened to be on the watch list of basically suspicious activity. So they were, the ones who did the Bank of Bangladesh, which was the Lazarus heist, was of course one of those most notorious kind of, massive Ocean's 11 attempted digital theft. And to your point is that it was a complete year process of setting everything up, setting the foundation, doing all the preparations. And very likely we'll start seeing more of those because, as you said, I think one of the biggest things, I think the biggest threat for me from 2024 and moving into 2025 was deepfakes. And the advancements that was made, and then we've seen the case where the Zoom call that was basically the accountant saw the CFO and the CEO in the background of the Zoom chat, and it was deepfakes. And they thought that was a real video, and they actually saw the people, they saw their colleagues, they saw their bosses, and they ended up doing a $25 million transfer that ended up being basically financial theft. So absolutely, for me, pig butchering is the kind of is the end-to-end kind of whole cycle of, doing it, preparing, looking and learning and getting that big, massive payday. And all these technologies like deepfakes and even AI's really come in where the social engineering piece has got so good that it's so hard to even detect the threats. One of the things I've mentioned in previous is that in Estonia, where I'm based, the language has always been protected because it was very difficult. And the previous language translations from previous language translators were not very good. And those are the ones that was being used for the phishing and social engineering. When you basically replace that with ChatGPT, the translations are perfect. And now that is no longer protection. So social engineering and deepfakes and AI, all of those things coming together changes the entire threat landscape to the point where we have to reset and think about what things make those, what does early detection? What can you do from a human perspective to identify those areas? So those are two great examples. I really, really like those. And absolutely the agents, one of the things, go back to the AI agent side. Me being based in Estonia government had this thing called the Cratbot, which is the government's AI agent for the citizen. So citizens, we citizens will have our own AI agent that will interact with the government for us. And to your point, we'll have our own personal agent, which might do, let's say, our personal life, update certain social media, contact my family, book a vacation, do transfers. And so you'll have your own personal agent. And it'll be two things. It'll be non-interactive, fully autonomous, and interactive. I think the first ones will be interactive. We'll verify. We want to check to make sure that it's doing the right things, because right now we've got a lot of mistakes happening because it's not always correct. The accuracy is not quite there yet. So we have to intervene quite a lot and check, before books, is that the right information? It's the right year, it's the right destination stuff. So double checking everything. And then at some point in time, you might turn on some of the autonomous. You might just say, yeah, I'm fine with it doing the updates. And, we're sending out calendars and replying to certain things for you so that you have some autonomous capability. But you're absolutely right. I think we may have different risk levels of agents, AI agents out there. You'll have your government interactive one, you might have your employment one, and you'll have your personal one. And all of those, you'll be able to have different authorization and controls and security levels of.
Yeah, and I think what'll be interesting, Joe, is not even if, it's when. There's a headline story, and there's no predictions in this year about this, but I mean, it's nobody wants to tell the story of how this happens to Sarah or Trevor or something. But, one of these autonomous agents go on amok that, all of a sudden, you're working for some German company you didn't even know you were working for, right? I mean, something really crazy is going to happen, right? It's going to be like, what do you mean? Not, what do you, it's going to be some random phone call that somebody's going to tell. I mean, it's going to happen.
It absolutely is going to happen. We're going to look back it almost happened when we look back a couple of years ago with the Microsoft Clippy. Remember when it was been let go in social media, and then people started training it on really bad models and became very biased. So you're absolutely right, is that if you haven't fully secured, and I think one of the big things was the recent executive order, which was quite interesting from the government in the US, and also CIS's best practice guideline and framework. I think that is really setting where you have to start thinking about those things, to your point, is that because they will happen. And if you haven't thought about them today and put the controls in place and really being strict around who has access to the algorithms and the models, and how do you train that data, and where's that data being trained from, and the data source and origins. So you really have to make sure that if you're not in full control of the learning model itself and the algorithm, you will have those scenarios where it might just go off on its own accord and start making decisions that you never thought of.
Well, I think, we have today, as we're talking, I literally this idea just popped in my mind. I'll give somebody out there might turn this into a business opportunity, but literally, we have, we have fraud reports, we have, these different types of identity theft protection, around our social security numbers in the U.S., numbers you have there in Europe and around the world, different sensitive data around our health records or this or that, and the reality is, it's now going to be even a broader, I suspect you're going to have more of the identity theft protection will be much broader, and or it'll be, have a different meaning, really. It's not just social security numbers and credit card numbers and somebody stole my, tax records. It's going to be they stole my identity and or, tried to take my autonomous agent and go work in South America or something. I mean, literally, where has my identity been that I don't know about? Because this autonomous agent is running around the world pretending to be me. I think those days are coming. I think that maybe is, I don't know, maybe that's a stretch thing over the next couple of years, but
I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen.
Okay.
Because one thing is, because I've always referred to, so, to your point, is we've had this whole discussion for years of cloning people, and sheep, kind of Dolly the sheep was one of the first examples.
Yeah.
But I think we're at the point where actually, digital clones, we're creating enough of our digital DNA on the internet. And that, the more that you contribute to basically, public domains, videos, audios, chat, conversations, likes, preferences, all of that, if an attacker or somebody who wants to abuse your identity, they could capture all of that and create a digital clone of you. And it will look like you, it will sound like you, it might even have very similar personality traits. It may not be 100% identical, because one thing I think I read in the book recently is what the AI agents can't replicate is your soul or your frontal cortex, which is kind of, where things will change and you have different opinions or different concepts. So the one thing is they don't have the frontal cortex, which means that that's the one thing that they can't clone. But it will get to very much that it will sound like you. It will actually even use words and phrases that you would, So your point is it will happen, and the technology would get so good that it can happen in seconds. There's things that you can see, the six finger gives it away sometimes, or the multiple hands in some of the images. It does make mistakes, but I think those will be definitely cleaned up to the point where digital clones, digital identity theft. And to your point, there's one thing we've started seeing even in 2024 last year was actually people going and getting jobs using stolen identities. And those being actually, state actors.
Totally.
For basically
that is absolutely happened. The people hiring people from North Korea, and that's been in the papers, and companies coming out and admitting that. And yeah, I totally agree. That actually happened in 24. So
yep. So I just think it will get improved, the technology to make that even more severe and more concerning. So what other things was interesting from the list as well? What's
yeah, sure. So I'm going to run down there really quickly. Cover, what we do is we look at the top reports, not just individual predictions. Literally, it's thousands of predictions, but we look at hundreds of reports from different vendors. We then rank the reports from 1 through the year that it is, and then we have 5 bonus reports like honorable mention. But so it's 25 different reports. We can run through those in a minute. But then we take all these reports. And by the way, the value here is actually very substantial. And I encourage people not just to, obviously listen to Joe and I, but go and read the reports. The real key is the why. People think, these are just like random predictions. No, this is like predicting the weather. There's a science behind it. It's connecting the dots. And you can learn I always learn so much. To me, it helps me. I gain more out of this than I give.
It's a training session in many regards.
This is all based on free information. Many of these companies charge, would normally charge the Foresters and the IDC and Gartner. This is based on their free information. If you want to go get their detailed paid reports, you can pay tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars for that. So this is stuff that these vendors give away for free every year. They're 20, 30, sometimes 40-page reports with detailed references, and they're very, very well done. And I learn a ton. And then we roll it all up and we talk about the top 10 trends. So the trends that cut across all the reports. And I'll just run through those real quickly. All the detail is there. We'll put the link there.
We're going to put them in the show notes, absolutely. We're going to make it available for everyone.
Agentic AI, we mentioned. AI-driven scams and social engineering, we mentioned 1 and 2, which is the pig butchering. 3, ransomware evolved with automation and AI. And again, lots of examples how ransomware will still be here, but it's going to change. It's going to evolve. Supply chains attacks on the rise. Again, you say, Dan, that's been happening for years. Totally agree. But it's going to be definitely modify and change and evolve. And open source of vulnerabilities, cloud multi-vendor risks around the cloud, and how that's going to change with specific examples in each category. Democratization of cyber tools is number 5. Number 6, geopolitical cyber warfare will intensify. Again, that's, looking at Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, talking about the big 4 and how that's going to change. That was 6. Number 7, post-quantum threats will accelerate. So the need to, a lot of talk about what's called harvest now, decrypt later. So grab all your data, even if it's encrypted. Maybe later I can decrypt it. People talked about the balloon that went across America, grabbing all the data from China, and the same kind of thing. But that's going to happen online in the internet. Number 8 was IoT. Edge devices are growing attack vectors. Again, okay, we got the cloud, we got the mobile, we got the individual end devices. 9 was AI-powered SOC, security operations centers, and automation will redefine defenses using more and more security co-pilots, AI-driven security operations centers. More and more of that first line, that entry-level agent will be AI. And then the second tier, third tier might be more advanced agents. And then the number 10 trend, and again, there's plenty more in the report, but regulatory pressures and compliance shifts. I'll just say a couple quick things about this, Joe. There's some disagreements in some of these that not everybody thinks. Some people say go north, some people say go south. Some people think we're going to have more regulation, that especially around AI, you're going to start seeing a big move around regulation related to cryptocurrencies and crypto, more regulation around privacy and other things. Other people say, no, we're going the opposite direction. Trump and his new administration, especially in the U.S., I'm talking now with Trump 2.0, and we're just being inaugurated as we're taping this. It was yesterday. And literally the idea that deregulation, opening up more mergers, more opportunity for banks and for Wall Street and for companies. And so what will that do to reporting? What will that do to cyber regulation? Will people have to report incidents? There's a divergence in opinion on this. And it's important to read both sides, and they both have strong arguments.
Absolutely. That's one of the things I've seen as well, is I've seen, for example, the EU coming out with the EU AI Act, which is really specific around regulating the, impact that AI can have to citizens from a life perspective, the damage side of things. The UK taking much more of a guideline approach, which was in conjunction with CISA, which they came out with in the end of 2023, and then revamped it. And then just recently, the executive order kind of pushed that through the executive order. But I completely agree. I think the direction till a couple of days ago was actually for more regulation, more insights, more transparency. But I do think with the Trump administration, that might go the opposite direction, because you looked at the inauguration, you look at a lot of the people that was basically sitting in the front row or second row, wherever the tech, which are very dependent on making sure. And you looked at, even Meta taking away their basically fact checking process to being community driven, and that's, to your point, a direction towards, non-regulation or self-regulation type of thing. And then even look at, where TikTok as well was, 1 day ban and then back in again. And you look at then, being potentially partnering, or, the US part being taken over by an AI company, which then you get into, a lot of questions gets raised. So you're absolutely right. I think, there is regulation, but there's also deregulation as well happening. And it could go in two different directions. Different countries and different states might take very opposite approaches, and only time will tell. For me, I think, going back to even the TikTok story, I think that there's a wrong approach in that. They targeted a company rather than the fundamental issue, which was that, data collection of a large amount of citizens by a company that's, has a state-owned connection. They should have looked at the fundamental problem at the core, because when TikTok went dark a few days ago, everyone moved to different platforms. Same problem. I saw pictures been taken from aircraft carriers that was being posted on Rednote. Again, another Chinese app that's basically doing the similar thing. So for me, I think the fundament is not addressing the fundamental core of the problem. Just targeting a company is the wrong direction, because what you end up doing is you just push. It's like taking down a ransomware gang, and then you've taken down the infrastructure, but you didn't take down the main core problem behind it. And a lot of them just create a new ransomware variant to come out with another smaller one, and it grows again. So you have this reoccurring snowball effect. So for me, I think that's one of the things, but it's visible, it's highly visible. And again, what's going to happen in the next 75 days will be very interesting, I think, definitely around when you look at apps and data privacy might get some new direction. Any thoughts, anything that you have that you thought?
No, I think I agree with everything you just said. I think, listening to Trump, I would it's kind of gotten a life of its own now. It's almost like it's a shadow indication of U.S.-China relations a little bit. Like, let's cut a deal. It's almost like listening to him last night from the Oval Office. It was literally like, well, TikTok, and he always goes into this little side spiel about how a lot of the young people voted for him and they all are on TikTok and they want to keep it going. So maybe I should keep it going because they like me on TikTok. And, and so, these side issues that are almost comical, but, we had a bipartisan Congress and the U.S. Supreme Court that upheld saying this is a threat to the U.S. And there's a lot of reasons for that. There's hundreds of papers. I'm sure your audience is very smart on this topic. They can read those papers. I've done a couple blogs on it. I'm sure you have, the good, the bad, and the ugly with TikTok. This issue has been around for several years, at least, even more, and it hasn't gone away. I think my gut tells me that they're going to do a deal. I don't know when. I don't know what the deal is going to be, whether that's, somehow 51% U.S. owned, 49%, China owned. But it's almost become an indicator of U.S.-China relations, which is kind of interesting. And could it be part of a deal on tariffs? I mean, you think, come on, really? TikTok is part of the deal on tariffs? Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I was a little shocked last week when, right before I guess last Friday, Trump came out and said he had a great call with President Xi in China, and we're going to make the world a safer, more wonderful place together. So I wasn't expecting that. I mean, I think there's, what time is it now? Tomorrow it could be another, another new deal that he's cut. Some people think he's going to give it to Elon Musk. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? But I do think it's serious. I do think it's not just, a joke. I think it's one last thing I would mention on this, Joe, that, and they mentioned that this morning on CNBC when I was watching it. When I work out in the mornings on the treadmill, I'm watching the CNBC. The morning show and what they're doing at the World Economic Forum in Davos and all of that. The description by several people that, TikTok is very different in China than it is in the U.S.
It's an educational platform.
Regulated very heavily. Back to our regulation point, it's very heavily regulated in China. It's a positive force for their education and their learning in China for young people and for the entire society. Where in the U.S., it's very different, and it's more about
it's texts and memes.
Exactly right, and addicting people to watching really cute, videos. And so, I mean, the reality is it's you can come at this thing from 47 different directions. I do think that my gut is that it's not going to go away. My gut is they're going to cut a deal. I don't know what that deal is going to look like. But I think that the very fact that you've got a bipartisan Congress and the U.S. Supreme Court that's upheld the TikTok ban, means it's not going to just be, it's not going to go on in its current form. It's got to change.
Absolutely. I think it was interesting. I remember going back to the reciprocal point where when India banned TikTok, and then China was like, okay, let's ban the Indian apps from China. And we're like, we don't have any. So again, it was interesting going back, and I saw Dark Tangent DT, his comment for the audience, Jeff Moss, who's kind of the founder of the Black Hat Conference and DEF CON, and he made a comment where it should be a reciprocal kind of approach. Is that if TikTok's allowed in the US, then things like Meta and Instagram and other types of and X and so forth should be allowed also in China. So it should be a reciprocal kind of play from basically that open the market to our apps. If we're open up our market to your apps, and that's the other approaches. So then it becomes much more a fair and open. But right now it is not. It's only one directional. It's outbound to your point. And there's two different versions as well. Two different, the educational one in China versus the non-educational one that I would say in the rest of the world. But it'd be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of weeks, and that might set a kind of precedent for other apps and other future directions as well. Anything? What would you like to kind of give the audience who are recommendations? What would be your suggestions for reading materials or education? Or we'll definitely make sure that your book and the blog and the Citizen Insights session you do with Earl as well, because that's always fantastic on Bright Talk. That's always fun.
Like I mentioned earlier, we want to have you back on the show this year, so we're excited for that. I'll just mention the top 5 reports. Again, these aren't Dan Lohrmann's predictions. And I just say 2 quick things on this. I'll just run through the top 5 real quick. You can go read those. Some of them call them predictions. Some call them forecasts. It's funny. Some people say, we don't do predictions. We do insights. We do forecasts or we do trends. But really, they're all the same. I mean, the reality is they're using the word interchangeably. I understand a trend is not a prediction, but they're really bringing in. So like Trend Micro was the top report this year because
they always do a fantastic report.
They do a fantastic job. And the references, you can go, and if you don't believe something, just go read the material, and you can disagree. That's fine. Disagree with it. I mean, we're trying to connect the dots and say what's going to happen next. And obviously the curve can change, but they have, literally hundreds of references of stories and articles and examples you can go to. Google Cloud Mandiant was second. Their great cybersecurity forecast 2025. They do a great job. All of these, by the way, if you don't want to say, Dan, I'm not a reader, I don't want to read these long, they have videos. A lot of them have interactive things. You can scan it quickly on their websites, and you can click on one and zoom in on the specific, zoom in on one topic. You don't have to read the whole thing. Some of these are very, very, very kind of state-of-the-art, innovative, in some cases, reports. So it's really cool to even watch it and see how they do some of this. A lot of reports, a lot of examples, talking about Google Willow as well, where they're going.
Oh, that was a bit of a shock for me, was the Willow chip and its capability on actually, basically cracking the encryption key where it was, I think it was 10, can't even remember. The number was triplets or whatever it was.
It's
Which was
crazy. It really is. It's a great video in there. It's a video you can watch. We link to, and there's a lot on encryption and where they're going with quantum and that whole thing. So WatchGuard does a great job. I always think they always kind of they're a small company playing with the big boys, but they're always very creative. They do some great reports. I'll run through their 5. Malicious AI will create attack chains. Threat actors move to long con. They call it the long con versus pig butchering. Same thing. Bad actors profit with Gen AI. This is a funny one. CISOs become the least desirable role in business. So, CISOs are getting a bad name out there. Some people that last year was like, our roles will grow. And in many cases they have, involving AI, involving kind of all areas that maybe they weren't involved in before. But it also puts a lot of pressure on what they have to produce. And then, Fortinet did a great job as well. Really great report. Some of the people on our show will tell me they like Fortinet best. And then Splunk was number 5. Fortinet, one person said Fortinet, one person said Splunk. They really like Splunk, which did a really nice job as well. They're now part of Cisco, but they have a really great report. Again, I get 20-something pages and lots of examples in here. So those are the top 5. You could go on and read them. I was going to ask you, I don't know if you have time for this, probably around time now, but I always get Kaspersky's always in the top 10. I think they've often been in the top 5. They're kind of banned in the U.S., but they always put out good reports.
They still have a lot of coverage in Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia. So they still have a large presence. And with the Kaspersky Lab portion, do pretty phenomenal research. And then again, they're also a big contributor to the Interpol as well. Yep. So they do a lot of collaboration there. So their insights, again, there's always the question around, the connectivity and connection between state and private companies, but they do pretty impressive research. Absolutely.
I think so too. They were number 6. So I just throw that out there. And again, go to the material. You can disagree, but educate yourself. We always talk about, we all have to be lifelong learners. We all have to reinvent ourselves. I mean, what I do now, how I do it is so different than it was even a decade ago. And so all of us, our jobs are changing, our roles, AI is changing, the technology, the innovation is changing. So I just encourage people to go out, read the material, read the reports themselves, read the details from these companies, because they really offer an abundance of really helpful material.
I couldn't agree more. One of the things I do with these predictions and insights and trends and reports is it allows me to understand I've got my own research that I do, and then I try to overlay it with the other, reports and insights and trends to see, is there something I need to be thinking about differently? Is there something that I need to double down on? Because it means that, yes, I need to do an action, because this is very likely applicable and high impact to the work I do. So it allows me to really learn. And that's what we do. We're a community. We're a community of people who, have various different types of input. And that the research comes from huge experts in the field. They are some of the, they've got large teams, the likes of Google, Mandiant, and they've got an impressive team. So when they provide their insights, absolutely, I'm going to look at it. Like when Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report comes out, I'm going to look at it because the contribution from the community in that is so vital. It's our scorecard in many regards. So I thank you for correlating and bringing this all together, because it simplifies when it comes to people like me, is that it simplifies it for me rather than me going and having to do the research myself and find everything. You bring it and make it so much easier for everyone to consume. And then doing it with the CISO Insights session you do is another, it's behind some of the thought process as well. So great work, Dan, and keep up the fantastic work. It's always very much appreciated. And again, many thanks for coming on the episode. It's always great to chat with you. I always learn something new and always having a great conversation. So if the audience have any questions, what's the best way to contact you?
Feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, Dan Lohrmann on LinkedIn, LOHRMANN, and you see my name. And Joe, I just want to say thank you to you. You do amazing work. You're always, everyone talks about you. Say, oh, Joe. I mean, he's literally a global celebrity in the cybersecurity world. So thanks so much for having me. It's really an honor to be on your show. So thank you.
It's always for me the highlight of my time of the week is talking to amazing both security experts and leaders and innovators like yourself, because that's for me it's the most fun part is listening and learning. So thank you. So for everyone, definitely we'll get all the show notes, we'll get all the links to the blogs, we'll get the links to Dan's books, as well as the CISO Insights episodes. So it allows you to quickly find them, be able to go and look for more information, for more learning opportunities. So again, Dan, many thanks for the audience. Stay safe, take care. Tune in every 2 weeks for the 401 Access Denied podcast, bringing you insights, learning, educational trends, hot topics to really make it simplified and help you understand the current state of cybersecurity in the world today. So thank you, stay safe, and take care. All the best.
So long.